Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sterling Live. My name is Caitlin Brower. I am Sterling's social media manager and your host for today's episode of Sterling Live. As you can see, I have three guests with me today. I think it's been a little while since I've had three guests on with me, but I'm so excited because they are a panel of experts and you guys are going to learn so much today. So let's go ahead and get you introduced to our guests. So we have Heather Pelton, Head of Operations, Investigations, Zach Nelson, Manager of Due Diligence Investigations, and Jessica Krassow, Client Success Partner, Diligence. And as you can see on the bottom, our topic today is risk and reputation, the power of due diligence investigations. So thank you, all three of you, for joining me today. I'm so excited to talk about this. I'm so excited to learn so much. Putting together the questions and working with you prior to the episode today, I feel like I learned so much, but I know you're going to dive into it a lot deeper. There's things I didn't learn yet, so I'm very excited for that. So let's get you guys introduced, for yourselves introduced to the audience, because I can only do so much. So Heather, I'm going to come to you first. And Heather, this is your second time on Sterling Live, or your second time. I was going to say you might have been on three. Second time. So thank you for coming back. Can you reintroduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. So I have been with Sterling Diligence for the past 7 years. I began as an investigator and was managing our executive investigation branch of Sterling Diligence. And then the past year I have, as you mentioned, I'm the head of operations for investigations for all of Sterling Diligence. So I oversee the business due diligence that we're talking about today, executive investigations, and our citizenship by investment business lines. So, and just a quick plug for those who don't know, Sterling Diligence is the branch of Sterling that focuses on these deep dive investigations.
Thank you. And thank you for coming back on another episode with me. Always love to bring people back. Obviously, Zach and Jessica, you're probably going to come back in the future too. So get ready for that. But Zach, I'll move over to you. My notes say that you're the manager of due diligence investigations, but I heard that you're actually an Elvis impersonator. So can you clarify that for our audience? What exactly do you do?
So I oversee, yes, the business due diligence line for Sterling Diligence, and my Elvis impersonation skills I do not get paid for. I get routinely booed for. So that will not be something we will ever want to have on a Sterling Live talk.
It will be our follow-up episode to this one. But thank you so much. Even if you don't give us an Elvis impersonation today, I know you'll be giving us some great information around diligence. So thank you. Jessica, last but not least, can you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. I'm Jessica Krassow. I've been with Sterling Diligence for about 4.5 years. And I started on the investigative side, actually on the employment side for a couple of years. And then the last 2.5 years, I've been the client success partner for Sterling Diligence. Very personalized.
Yes, of course. All right. Well, Heather, Zach, Jessica, thank you for joining. I do want to give a quick reminder to our audience, if you're watching live on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube right now, if you have any questions for our panel throughout the episode, you'll just go into the comment section across all three of these social media platforms, and I will get the questions or comments over to our panel as I see fit throughout the episode. So again, questions, comments, anything you have, but let's go ahead because I have a ton of questions. So I'm going to be a little selfish here. We're going to get into it because I've got all the questions for you guys. But let's do an overview of due diligence first. Heather, I know you gave that little blurb in the beginning of what Sterling Diligence is, but let's go into it a little bit more with what is the difference between an employment background check and a due diligence investigation?
Absolutely. So there are a couple of significant differences. The first being the purpose of either the check or the investigation. So employment background checks are utilized specifically for hiring decisions, whereas these due diligence investigations are utilized for risk mitigation and not tied to employment in any way. Employment checks are essentially checking the boxes, if you will, of did someone work where they said they worked? Did they go to school where they said they went? Were there any issues in the states, the counties, the cities where they claim they were in? Additionally, employment checks have to follow the Fair Credit Reporting Act, or the FCRA, whereas due diligence investigations do not, because they're not for hiring purposes. And so With due diligence investigations, we can report information beyond what the FCRA regulates, charges that don't lead to a conviction or negative findings beyond 7 years, for example. And then another piece is the consent. So any sort of employment check would require consent from the candidate that they know we're doing the background check. But due diligence doesn't always need that. We can conduct it with consent and get a little bit deeper of information, but it can also be done discreetly if a client so chooses. Maybe they're not ready to make that partner aware that they're thinking of doing some business with them. And so I'll say the last major difference is the check versus the investigation. We'll obviously expand on this as we talk today, but due diligence investigations do exactly that. They investigate. Our team of investigators search for information that somebody may not necessarily disclose or want someone to find out, whether they don't put it on their resume, they don't put it on a LinkedIn profile, they don't list it in an online biography. Our investigators can dig through hundreds of records at a time on an entity or an individual to piece together a story. And we don't draw conclusions for our clients. We just paint the full picture, and they get to make that decision that's best for their organization or specific situation.
It's a, important point to bring up at the end there that, again, we're not, providing our recommendation or things like that. We are just handing over the information. So I'm happy that you ended on that one. But clearly there are some big differences. So that leads me to my next question. And Zach, I'll come to you first here. With the differences, who would typically need due diligence?
So we recommend pretty much anyone, whether you're part of a corporation or an individual looking to invest in either a new investment possibility, a portfolio company that you are already entertaining with, or looking to do a merger and acquisition. We recommend you do the due diligence early in that process in order to find out as complete a picture as you can about the possible investment, who is going to be handling your money, what they're going to be doing with it, and what their background is like.
So Jessica, can you chime in a little bit more from like the risk mitigation standpoint?
Sure. Yeah, it really boils down to how well do you know the players in the prospective business relationship and the history there. We're talking far beyond standard Google searches. Anytime you're considering linking yourself or your company to another company or a group of people, you incur risk, both reputationally, financially, and the goal is always a return on investment. So a lack of due diligence, incomplete due diligence, partial due diligence opens you up to increased risk, especially if there's hidden information that was not disclosed in the discovery process or not discovered. And a thorough due diligence investigation helps uncover those potential risks. It could be a volatile internet footprint or historical litigation that might not show up on a recent history. If not uncovered, that could tie your name and your dollars to the legal implications of the negative behavior if you go through with that. So we are a licensed private investigative firm that gives us additional tools and resources that are not always available in standard checks.
So you had mentioned, within the idea of risk mitigation, what is uncovered during, one of these investigations. So, with that, Zach, my question for you now is, what is typically uncovered in a due diligence investigation?
So our investigations are going to lay out some of the items Heather had talked about that you get across the board, whether it's a due diligence or an employment background investigation, verification of employment, licensure, education, things of that nature. One of the main differences in our due diligence investigations, as we get into legal proceedings, sanctions, things of that nature, is we are not bound by any regulatory or reporting act of what we can report. We're going to give you everything that we can find, whether that's a bankruptcy filing from 20 years ago or a criminal filing from 17. As long as it is available to the general public, so our investigations are only going to be open source, we will find everything, whether the subject initially let the client know about it or not. And that could also be internet footprint. They had stuff that they posted online years ago and they thought it was deleted or locked or secret. If we find it, we're going to provide that information to the client. The idea behind this is that these are the types of things that could end up changing the way our clients look at their deals. It could change their investment strategy with that based on our findings. And so, as Heather mentioned, we're never going to make a recommendation, but we are going to give you everything that's publicly available.
So to continue on the idea of, these organizations making potential, investments here, Jessica, I have a question for you. How can due diligence help with investment opportunities?
So as we kind of touched on, it obviously mitigates risk. It gives you that valuable insight into the reputational and financial hurdles you could be facing by linking yourself with an entity or a group of individuals. But that being said, due diligence investigations are actually crucial in any type of business relationship along the entire life cycle of a business. So we could be talking merger and acquisition, we could be talking investment, pre-investment, post-investment, expansion, even all the way up to exit planning. How are you planning on leaving your business when you decide to retire? And do you trust those people?
Zach, anything to add in regards to investment opportunities?
No, I mean, the main theme that we want to paint there is it's very important to give a complete picture of what you're doing with your money. Who is handling your money, and is that someone of a reputable nature that you would trust to do that?
Absolutely. All right, so that was a really good overview for our audience, for sure. So let's get into some trends that we're seeing right now in the market, with due diligence. So we're seeing a lot of due diligence activity in the news, pop culture, things like that. So Jess and Zach, I want to pick your brains on some recent examples. But Jessica, I'll come to you first.
Sure. So pretty recent example, actually, UBP, which acquired Credit Suisse to help avoid the further turmoil in the banking environment. We've had a lot of recent bank collapses, but they were given a very, very short time frame for their due diligence process with that acquisition, and they disclosed in press recently that that's actually going to result in a multi-billion-dollar loss for their company, which is not obviously what you want. Obviously, their situation couldn't be avoided because of the particulars there. But whenever possible, due diligence is definitely not something to be rushed, because when you consider what's at stake, the risk is just too high.
I love the recommendation there. Don't rush it. Obviously, some of these situations are difficult in that manner, like you said, but not trying to rush that for sure. So, Zach, any recent examples that you'd like to share?
Yeah. So Taylor Swift, we all pretty much know who she is and what she
Everyone's
does.
like, wait, Taylor Swift?
Yeah. And
Pause,
FTX.
rewinds,
Absolutely. And FTX, we're all familiar with the cryptocurrency company that is now in all kinds of legal and criminal trouble for all the fraudulent activity they did. They had actually approached Taylor Swift a couple years ago, asking her to sell her tickets as non-fungible tokens or NFTs. And during the process of Taylor determining if she was going to move forward with this endorsement, she asked FTX some very basic questions about how their product was registered with the SEC. And based on the information she received back from FTX, she opted not to move forward with the endorsement. And looking in the news now, you see other major athletes such as Tom Brady, Steph Curry are embroiled in some of these FTX litigation issues because they did not do their diligence on the product they're being asked to endorse.
Two prime examples coming from the banking industry and pop culture with Taylor Swift, but also tying in currency there. So, literally prime examples happening in real time today. So really interesting to hear those. Quickly, we did get two questions on LinkedIn. Someone did ask if these get recorded. Yes, this is live right now, but it'll be on demand on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube afterwards. I do want to clarify that real quickly. And then another question asking around, can both discrete and non-discrete searches be conducted? I'll let one of you answer it. Anyone can take it.
Yes, they can. There are certain searches you cannot do without a consent, such as a credit report or DMV record. Those will always require it, but litigation, regulatory filings, most verifications, not all, but most can be done without consent.
Great. And a reminder, again, got some questions in on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, please go ahead and pop them in the comment section. Let's move on here. So what are, we talked a little bit here around the risks and then, organizations, uncovering things. You both just shared really awesome examples. But what are the risks of not running due diligence investigations for both organizations and individuals? Jessica, I'll come to you here first.
Sure. So the goal is just to get a complete picture of what's going on. So if you're looking at simply the entity that's involved or simply the partners or the principals, founders of the entity, you're going to miss the activity that's happening on one or both sides. So sometimes you have principals who put everything through the entity. So if there's anything that is a little sketchy, maybe questionable, that would bring up some additional steps in the due diligence process, they've successfully routed that through the entity. So if you're just looking at the individual, you're not going to find that information. Vice versa, if you look at just the individuals or just the entity, you're going to maybe miss the other side. So, there's litigation that can happen on both sides. And if you're just looking at one side, you're going to miss the other side.
So to follow up on that question, Zach, entity search versus individual search, what is involved in both of those there?
Sure. So our individual search is going to be very in-depth. We're going to look at education, employment, licensure. We're going to look at everywhere they've lived, worked, went to school, past 10 plus years. And we're going to give you all the litigation, regulatory filings, credit, DMV, internet footprint, press and media searches, social media searches. The main difference between an individual and an entity will be the searches that are specific to an individual. And so things like a criminal record, a credit summary, a DMV record, those are going to be specific to the individuals. For an entity, you're looking at more civil records, things of that nature, as opposed to looking at, citations, DMV record, criminals. Those are going to be the main differences right there. We're still going to go as in-depth as we can in the records. For entities, we're going to look at where the company was formed, where it maintains its headquarters, and it has any other type of, footprint that we need to evaluate. We're going to dig into those types of locations on it.
So after looking at, trends we're seeing, the overview of due diligence that we've already gone over, I want to talk about, the importance of engaging with a partner like Sterling to, get one of these investigations started, for your organization. So Zach, I'm going to stay with you here. What are some strengths of Sterling Diligence?
Absolutely. So as Jessica had mentioned earlier, we are a private investigative firm licensed, and as such, we get access to certain database sources and record research places that individuals would not get. On top of that, we are a firm with decades of experience between the investigators. All of us have been doing this for a very long time. We are former government security clearance investigators, attorneys, ex-military law enforcement, investigative journalists, small business owners. We all have a very unique set of skills that hone and lead us to wanting to dive, to wanting to find that next part of the puzzle to provide that to our clients.
Love that. Heather, anything to add?
So as Zach touched on, we have deep expertise. We also have a consultative approach. So we work directly with our clients to clear up any questions, concerns, a certain record they may have seen, and have additional questions. We'll go digging further. And one of our highlight pieces is the global security and licensing research we do, because the majority of our clients are in financial services industry naturally. And so with that, we want to ensure folks are properly registered and the client is aware of any issues prior to closing a deal or a partnership. So our team conducts very in-depth research through SEC filings, FINRA, National Futures Association, comb through Edgar filings and other resources, looking to identify and highlight registration information, assets under management, arbitration awards or actions involving an entity or an individual, as Jess mentioned. And so we additionally, we run extensive global sanctions searches to check, offshore leaks or entities that could be licensed elsewhere. Just really trying to identify where money may be situated that an investor would want to know about.
With those strengths, I'm sure some people listening right now are like, yes, sign me up. I'd like to get started. So Jessica, to reword this question real quick. When would someone need to engage with Sterling Diligence to undertake an investigation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I like to say anytime and all the time. Anytime you're talking right now, yesterday.
Yeah.
Yes. Anytime you're talking investments, acquiring, selling, even if you just have a stip sheet and you just have to check the box, we have customized scopes that are available for various use cases that can come in really handy based on your risk tolerance. So really it's your risk tolerance. This is going to tell you how thorough you need to go. But whether it's the initial investigation or you do a re-up after a certain amount of time to make sure that business relationship is still working, Sterling Diligence is here to help.
So Sterling is, taking a lot of time, a lot of effort to really build out our global capabilities. We are a global organization. We help global organizations. So I want to tap in to international investigations real quick. So Heather, what are our capabilities when it comes to international investigations?
Definitely. We have here at Sterling Diligence have very robust international capabilities. So we can conduct investigations in nearly every region in the world. We have long-standing partnerships with our sources, as they are also private investigators just like us with expertise in their specific areas. And they can access information as allowed. So I will say the caveat there is that some components of an investigation could change based on the country due to regulations. Some countries won't release criminal records to third parties, things of that nature. But the positive is our partnerships across the world know those caveats and can, we communicate that to our clients upfront so they know what they're getting.
Definitely. So earlier we spoke about trends we're seeing in the market and some real-time examples that we're seeing. So I want to now bring up our client base and some stories and some examples that we're actually seeing internally with our clients. So Zach, you mentioned before the different data points used to, get a larger picture of issues and integrity. Can you expand on that a little bit more? And then also provide an example of one of your clients who, has benefited from going a little bit deeper into a search?
Absolutely. So a little bit of research process here is we're going to look at all different types of sources. We're going to have our primary sources, which are specific court records, websites, going specifically to the agency or institution for the verification or for that record. But we're also going to have secondary sources, which are databases that we have access to as a licensed PI firm, which we're going to do a search through with multiple search terms and different varieties of that in order to get as wide a net as possible that relates to the investigation that we're doing. I was going to talk a little about global security and financial sanctions, but Heather kind of stole my thunder on that one. So we're also going to look at press and media. We want to provide you a good summary of what is out there on social media and in the press, in the news, as in this day and age, that is highly important information to have. So we're going to look at, like I said, social media, press, and we're going to provide all of this in a written summary. And now for the next part is some examples. Yes, I do have one that I'd like to share that we had a live investigation on a little while ago where we were doing an investigation on an individual in the US. And when we got into the court section, part of our standard research is we do a search through the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and we found a record for our individual. However, there was no corresponding criminal record, which is incredibly strange. If an individual is in the Bureau of Prison system, that means they have been arrested at some point. And so we went to the client, gave them a heads up as we're trying to get more records, and they went and asked their subject about it. And the subject came back and told the client who relayed this information to us that he was kidnapped in Peru, and as part of a prisoner exchange, he was let go and debriefed in the United States at a Bureau of Prison facility. However, once we went through the Bureau of Prison and got their official records of what happened, it turns out that this individual was actually arrested in Peru for trafficking illegal narcotics, and he was sentenced to jail in Peru. Now, due to some agreement the U.S. has with Peru, we actually did do a prisoner exchange, but it wasn't because he was kidnapped. It was because he served his time and then was coming back to the U.S. and had to finish out his sentence in our prison system. But since he was not arrested or charged in the U.S., that record did not show up in our criminal record search. And so the only way we would have gotten that information out is by going that extra step with the Bureau of Prisons to pull their records and relay that to the client.
Well, it's such a unique story, and just hearing it kind of as like an external party here, if someone comes to you and claims that they were kidnapped, does an organization just say, oh my goodness, of course, like that, I'm so sorry that happened,
Right. Yeah,
and move on? So it's a prime example of digging deeper and trying to find out and understand the whole story to find out that it was not true.
Exactly.
Ooh, these examples today, you guys are really pulling out the good stuff here. So, Jessica, do you have any more examples of some other cases you've worked on recently that stuck out?
Yeah, so a while back, I was actually part of an investigation where the subject had only disclosed the past several years of employment history, a very sparse educational background on the resume and LinkedIn. And during the investigation, we actually uncovered a prior education degree, and some press and media information led us down a trail, a rabbit trail that led us to a revoked teaching license due to alleged inappropriate behavior towards a minor, in addition to accused fiduciary dishonesty with school funds. So the case never made it to court, didn't show up in the normal litigation searches, but because our team found the mention in press, they followed those connecting pieces and put the puzzle together that led us to all of that information that we were then able to share with the client.
Yep. Another example of just, digging a little deeper for sure into, situations to where Sterling really provided some important information to the client. We do have a comment on LinkedIn, someone commenting interesting on the earlier example. And I think very much so, we all thought that was interesting. So agree there. But we've learned, so much on this episode, our audience, myself, it's been great talking to the three of you. I do want to remind our audience real quickly as we close out the episode today, if you have any final questions for our panel, please go ahead and put them in the comment section across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And as we, wait for any potential last minute questions to come in, I just wanted to get some final thoughts from the three of you on today's episode on due diligence investigations, Sterling Diligence, anything you'd like to leave our audience with. So I'm going to start from top to bottom. Jessica, I see you over to my right-hand side. Why don't you go ahead and get us started with final thoughts?
Sure. So really, you don't know what you don't know. So it's your job, you owe it to yourself and to your company to trust experts like Sterling Diligence to help you uncover the things that could cause you reputational and financial harm. So call us. You need us.
Zach, final thoughts for our audience.
Yep. So just a reminder that Sterling Diligence, our team, our types of investigations can run the gambit. We've had clients that had subjects that were high-profile individuals, athletes, movie stars, as well as the local HVAC store that's looking to expand or franchise. There's no investigation that we are not equipped to handle for you.
Both great two takeaways there. Heather, final thoughts for our audience.
Yeah, so I would just say that thorough due diligence is vital, as both Zach and Jess have mentioned multiple times today. But I encourage you to ask yourself, what's the cost to your business if you don't do your due diligence, just like Jess had mentioned. So whether it's an investment, an acquisition, financial or reputational repercussions, whatever it may be, due diligence is important. And so I hope everyone leaves this conversation understanding that the expertise and the experience of your investigative team, the partnerships with the clients and their suppliers are all part of that thorough due diligence and what we pride ourselves on here.
All right. Well, at this time, we don't have any further questions, but you can always give us a call, like Jessica said, if you have any questions. So we are here for you. But Jessica, Zach, Heather, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Sterling Live. Again, we learned so much from the three of you. I know our audience did as well. So I appreciate you guys coming on with me today. And with that being said, I thank you. I thank our audience, and I will catch everyone on the next episode. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.